Hi, I'm Colin Morgan, executive producer at Built to Sell Radio. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, you're going to absolutely love our new newsletter, Built to Sell News. We share actionable tips and insights to help you get inside the mind of an acquirer and punch above your weight when it comes time to exit. To subscribe, simply head over to builttosell.com/subscribe to sign up for free today.
George Hartley, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thanks, Sean. Nice to be here.
Yeah, tell me about SmartrMail. How did this company come about?
Sure. SmartrMail came out of another company that we were running at the time. So my brother and other co-founder, Phil, we had this art marketplace called Bluethumb, which is a long way from, a SaaS business, which SmartrMail is. And for this art marketplace where artists would sell their artwork and buyers would come, we built this kind of email retention tool. We were having this problem with, we wanted people buying art have very particular tastes. We wanted to be able to send them art they were interested in, and segmenting and using what off-the-shelf stuff wasn't working. And so we thought, well, why don't we just try and use a bunch of user data, what you've liked, what you've added to cart, blah, 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 and send recommendations that way. And so we built this little email tool and sent a daily email to our users, and it really worked for retention. It kind of started driving about 10% of our revenue. And so Phil and I thought, maybe this should be its own business. Maybe if it works for our art marketplace, maybe it should work for anyone. So that was the germ of the idea for SmartrMail. We thought we'd built, an MVP and it'd take 2 months to get to market. It took probably 17 months from that point to get onto Shopify app stores and BigCommerce and all these things. And yeah, anyway, that's how it got going. And we spun it out into its own SaaS company. So it was a full suite of it is a full suite of marketing automation tools, particularly for e-commerce across email and SMS. And
so, So if I understand it correctly, you've got this art marketplace where you're discovering people's preferences. Some people like modern art, and other people like art created by women. And there's probably all kinds of preferences and idiosyncrasies that people have. Mm. You're capturing those and then crafting email based on their preferences.
Yeah, exactly right. You like this art, these pieces of art, you'll probably like these. Yeah, exactly right. So we decided, this could apply to any e-commerce store, and that was away we went.
Got it. Okay. Similar to, the way Spotify will serve up musicians that if you like this artist, you'll probably like that artist, and so forth. Understood. And so what made you decide that there was a business there? Because a lot of people, I think, wonder, maybe this could be its own spin-off business, but everyone tells you don't do that because it's going to, dilute your focus. And how did you know that this was its own business that was worth investing in separately?
Well, we didn't. I would say we're terrible at saying no to interesting opportunities. So Phil, Ed and I often launched new things. And, they'd not work or fail. So we didn't know. The best evidence we had was that it was driving a good amount of revenue for Bluethumb. And I would say I've never been someone who sits down and plans and theorizes for a long time before launching something. We just tend to go as quick as we can, throw the pasta at the wall and see what sticks. Because ultimately, I guess, we've done a few companies. I'm 12 or 13 years in. Ultimately, I've worked out that even when I'm absolutely convinced of an idea, I've probably got a 1 in 3 hit rate of it actually working. So the only way you'll know is you build the smallest thing, try and sell it to someone. Do they buy it? Yes, great. So that's it. Cool. We didn't know. And like I said, we launched a bunch of stuff that hadn't worked before too. So it was just one that did.
Excellent. And so who's the we? You mentioned Phil, Ed, and yourself?
Yeah, the three of us. Yeah.
You're all 3 partners in Bluethumb?
Yeah. Funny, both Phil and Ed, they met studying accounting. So they were both accountants, and I was doing marketing. Then I quit to be a musician for 5 years, and then I sort of failed at that. And then I studied computer science. So it was kind of and then I actually did design. So I was a designer and 2 accountants doing these things. But look, the internet's a amazing place to learn and try this stuff. And so, I tend to think you learn by doing.
Yeah, I'm curious about the capitalization of the new business. So you've got Bluethumb, and it's a business. You, Phil and Ed, are investors, co-owners of that. Do you have outside investors in Bluethumb?
Yeah, we do. We did in SmartrMail. We raised money in that, and also in Bluethumb, we had some angel investors come along 3 years in, so 2015, and that was probably like one of the most important sort of pivotal moments in the Bluethumb journey. Bluethumb's now Australia's biggest art marketplace, and maybe 10% of the art market here. And we were working day jobs, struggling along for a few years, kind of really trying to. It's expensive and hard to build a marketplace or SaaS, and we're just putting our own money in, and then some successful e-commerce founders came in with an angel investment in 2015, and also they sort of came in with some hard-nosed advice about growth and all the rest. And so that was Jeremy Same and Adam Schwab, who run Luxury Escapes, which is a $1 billion kind of travel business here. And then in 2018, we took seed funding from a VC fund, partners in a VC fund called EVP in Sydney. So Australian quantum numbers, it was a bit over $1 million. That was a seed round here in Australia. It's very different, I think, in the USA. But yeah, that's the money we've raised on Bluethumb. And in SmartrMail, we raised a seed round and then grew it on its own steam.
Okay, so tell me about how you dealt with the separation, because again, I'm not suggesting you did anything nefarious or wrong, but I'd be curious though how you dealt with it. Because on some level, Jeremy and Adam are probably like, hey, well, we invested in Bluethumb, and now you're taking the kind of IP or what you've discovered on our dime, and now you're creating another thing. Like, did you talk to them proactively about like, how do we kind of keep you guys whole? Or did you ask them to invest in SmartrMail? Like, how did you kind of stick handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. And for an investor, that my money's full time. Why aren't you? That's the kind of a really legitimate question, right? There was already a bit of delineation when those guys came on board as angels. We actually had a bunch of other businesses still cooking along as well. We've always had a million balls in the air. And we were quite clear, my brother Ed was going to run Bluethumb. I was going to run SmartrMail. That we have to have sort of that like line in the sand and that delineation. You need one person, where the buck stops, right? We had those conversations. Everyone knew that, we had these other businesses, but there's always push and pull. I'm sort of on the product side of things. I love building software products. I really, really live for it. So, I really do. I did want to spend time on Bluethumb helping their product team, but ultimately I had to hire someone to replace me there to do that while I was there running running SmartrMail. But I also think it's like, there's too much advice from VC investors in the world. These guys have too big a pulpit. Their voices are too loud. They're not doing anything. They're deploying money. And their advice is always, focus in. You need one thing. You'll never make it if you have split focus. But I don't believe it. They have the optionality and a portfolio of, we can have a lot of misses and a couple of big wins, and we're going to have an amazing outcome, and we're great investors. But you don't want to give a founder that optionality. They have to be burn the boats all in or not. I think it's hypocritical, and I don't think it's in the best interest of founders to only have that. We've gotten to a good place because we've tried a million things, and we probably should have said no more. But you find these things that work by experimenting and having a few irons in the fire, I think. So anyway, that's my opinion. And so we've always run a kind of a stack of businesses like that.
So how did you get the money to build SmartrMail? It sounds like you got some angels, or
no, it was another business. We had another business selling app templates that spat out cash. So we were able to funnel that, that third business's cash was going into sort of bootstrapping SmartrMail. SmartrMail, we probably put in $280K of cash just to get the MVP and some traction. Building software without any money is actually impossible. Like, unless you're an amazing one-man developer, it's kind of bootstrapping. Every business needs capital, right? And so, we had this third business, it was funneling money in. And we had jobs as well. We're putting our own money into Bluethumb for a couple of years. So that's kind of how.
How did you start to acquire customers for SmartrMail?
That was interesting. We put it. It was it's an e-commerce specific tool, and it's actually all through the platforms we integrated with. So built an integration into BigCommerce, which was way bigger than Shopify at the time. And that was where customers would find us on these app stores. And then we went on to Shopify. I remember we joined and there was 60,000 stores on Shopify, I think back then, 2016. But it was great software, and the rate of improvement was so good that we sort of thought, okay, we better focus on these guys. They're going to win, They were a minnow, but they were just like, the rate of improvement was insane. So through those app stores was our channels, which ended up being a kind of rod for our own back as well, because if you're built on Apple or Google, you're just at their whim, and so absolutely our growth rate was completely tied to where we ranked in the App Store search. And if we dropped down a little bit, suddenly we'd go from growing 12% a month to 2% a month. And there's not much you can do. And it was like, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
How did you come to learn how the algorithm, the Shopify and the BigCommerce algorithm work?
There's a whole bunch of sort of black hat SEO-y stuff that was constantly being done. And so you get on, forums, chat to other people, experiment. They would play whack-a-mole on, the latest thing, keyword stuffing on titles or rate of reviews. So it was a constant game of, how can we rank higher? And that was kind of, we grew pretty well year on year for the 6 years we had. Well, I say well, it would have been a growth rate of, depending on the year, somewhere between 40% and 100% every year, which is fine for SaaS, but not good enough for big VC investment, really. Maybe we should have done that. And so we had this kind of catch-22 where it's like, you go and talk to these, I don't know, if we were like, oh, we want to go down the VC track, you talk to them and they're sort of really looking for a 2 to 3x growth rate on SaaS. But we didn't have it, and we didn't really have a bunch of money to really burn to kind of artificially get us there. But then we're up against competitors who may be better at raising or whatever. And, we're up against Klaviyo, who we had a feature parity in the early days. And then they sort of got better traction, raised $500 million. We'd raised $500,000. We're just so outgunned that was part of the thinking around, okay, look, we're still growing here. Maybe we should kind of think about the exit versus trying to take on this monster.
Did you have a point of differentiation against Klaviyo? You said your feature parity, but did you have anything that made you unique?
No, unfortunately, that was a mistake. I think we got caught in the trap, and it's pretty easy in SaaS software to get a lot of customer requests. Your other customer has this feature. It's vitally important. I'll switch to you if you have it. And we got caught in the trap of, we'll just, backfill these other features because we think they're a kind of a must-have. And so what we ended up doing was we started with a very unique product, and we ended up kind of becoming a more generic, everyone has these features product, instead of sort of really doubling down on what was unique about SmartrMail. So we didn't have enough product differentiation. So that was part of the problem of why we didn't get as big as I hoped we would.
How did you win any customers? If Klaviyo is so big and so dominant, and why would anyone buy SmartrMail?
Well, the sort of, those guys and others, it wasn't amazing. It wasn't their software. I would say a lot of those kind of more enterprisey or like really fully featured marketing automation tools, they're not very user friendly. And so I would say our strength was we had a great simple UX, and that's I really do care about user experience, and I sort of that was probably our biggest differentiator and selling point is we were quick to get going. We were very easy to understand how to kind of make your emails better and more personalized, and you didn't have to be an expert or have an agency there to get the best out of the setup. So that was the one differentiator that we did lean into, and so that was where we would get customers. But the problem was then we would sometimes spit them out the top as well. They would get to, they'd be doing a store would be doing, $500,000, $1 million in sales a year. SmartrMail's perfect. They grow, they are doing 5 million, 10 million. Suddenly they have a team of 5 doing their marketing. And then we actually would lose them at the top. And it was really devastating when someone kind of upgrades off you because you've done a good job and helped them grow. But I guess that's life, right?
Yeah. How was your churn rate? What would your churn rate have been for either revenue or logo, whatever?
Yeah. We just looked at gross kind of revenue churn. It was good for where we were. So I'm trying to remember back. I used to know these numbers exactly. I think we were churning around 4 to 5% a month, which sounds ugly for someone in enterprise or whatever. But if you consider sort of Shopify's churn rate is maybe 2.5% anyway. So we're sort of kind of baseline it there. These stores are disappearing at that rate. So then, we've got a couple more percent on top. So, and that's also the reality of building into these e-commerce stores. You might have had other people like me selling into kind of this mid-market SaaS. The churn is big, 4 to 5%, was okay because, that was just kind of, that's what life.
And did you start to formulate some view as to what the company was worth over time? Like, were you starting to triangulate around like this could be worth X, Y? Like, what was your sense as you were building it?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at public markets and say, I don't know, a publicly traded SaaS in this marketing automation space might be at 15 times top line valuation, and you can go sort of work backwards from there. I like talking to other founders, entrepreneurs who've sold businesses. I guess that's why this podcast is interesting.
Yeah,
because it's the value you get can sometimes seem a little arbitrary, or you find someone who can really see a massive upside. And maybe you, instead of getting 3 times your top line, you might get 7. So we did try and get a feel for that. We'd bought and sold a bunch of businesses on Flipper and a few other of those online websites for, small transactions. But, we'd have this rule of thumb. We'd try and buy at 1 to 2 times top line, and we'd try and sell at 3 to 5, right? Put in more work to find someone who really can benefit from what you've got, and do that arbitrage. So we sort of had those numbers in our head, and then we talked to a few folks as well.
And so where does it go from there? Like, I'd be curious to know, was there a straw that broke the camel's back? You're building this business, you've got Bluethumb growing like stink on one side, you're building SmartrMail, you're kind of riding the rising tides lift all boats of Shopify growing like crazy. Was there some sort of like event that happened that made you want to sell SmartrMail?
Yeah, I had a baby. I had a baby in 21, and I'd always been able to kind of work and then just see my partner and friends and then work, and on weekends I wasn't a workaholic, but I could work and I'd do some work, and I just was so used to being able to kind of work. And it turns out quite a lot in retrospect. And, once you have kids, you realize how much other time you had. So I had a baby in August of 21, and we had our first month of decline the month after. And I was like, oh man, I sort of was like, oh man, I don't know, this is a hard juggle now. So that was a real catalyst for me, is, seeing MRR go backwards the month after I'd had a kid. And I sort of had a little bit of a feeling of like, normally I'm like, I can force this. I can put in time. I can just punch harder, keep going. We can pull more levers. We can keep it growing, right? But I was like, I don't know if I can. I suddenly don't have as much time to do it. And I was like frazzled from not sleeping. So that was one. And then two was, just, the rise of the competition in the space was getting pretty crazy. That COVID bubble meant all these other competing companies raised big amounts of money. I remember another competitor raised $100 million on a pitch deck and then just copied us. And, you see the App Store suddenly go from, we were one of 20 email automation apps to one of like 300. I'm like, oh man, suddenly, so all that was kind of happening right then in 21. So that, it was starting to feel hard and starting to feel like we would need to raise a ton of money to even keep the wheels spinning and keep growing. So we had inbound from someone to buy us in December of 21. And that was when the conversation really started. I said, okay, someone seems genuinely like they might want to buy this thing. Let's look at it properly. Maybe we'll run a process. And so that was it.
They always say that the best time to sell a business is when someone's buying. So you had that interest inbound, which was nice. Go back though to having a child. Some people might be surprised to learn your MRR dipped that month, given that it's a SaaS business, so dependent on Shopify. So what was the part of the business that was still dependent on you that suffered in the month that you had your child?
Yeah, it's probably just my ego talking, John. I don't know. I don't know. I think it was more that thought of something's gone backwards here, and I'm not sure I have as much time and energy to find and fix it, because we hit a million disasters along the way. Every 6 months or so, there's something that could end the business. But suddenly MRR went backwards for the first month, and I hadn't been looking at our performance marketing for a few weeks and hadn't been able to sit in on the product stuff. And I actually don't know what it was, but I just thought, I'm not sure how I can fix this quickly. We sort of started recovering, and we were still chipping upwards, but it was certainly a kind of a moment of, okay, maybe it's time.
Ballpark, where are you in terms of revenue at this point, or number of employees, or some proxy for size?
So I think we probably had 18 or 19 of us, and we were approaching 2 million in annual recurring revenue, like ARR, which is sort of often how you measure, I guess, a SaaS. And by the time we sold a few months into the next year, we'd hit 2 million ARR.
That's super helpful. So you're, again, with the churn rate at 4% a month, 4 to 5% a month, you're acquiring customers very, very rapidly to replace to more than replace the leaky bucket, so to speak.
Yeah, you just got to fill that funnel. And e-commerce, there is that, there is that big kind of funnel at the top, but you've got a leaky bucket.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So how did you handle the inbound? What did you do with that?
Yeah, I'd gotten some advice from Matt, who sold Eat Now here in Australia for like 800 million. And so I asked him, dude, how did you pull that off? And he said, look, if you're ever going to sell, George, make sure you get an advisor who does this all the time and run a process. Like that's it. Just run a process, make sure you have someone there running it for you who does this as a job. Because, you've never done it. You won't get the best outcome. And so I'd always had that in my mind. And so when we had the inbound, we chose some sort of smaller M&A kind of advisory brokers in the USA called Discretion Capital. I'd met Einar, who runs that, I don't know, a year before, and he'd been recommended from another guy who sold Conversio. In fact, some of the inbound we'd had been from Campaign Monitor, and they'd flown us up to Sydney to sort of chat and potentially talk about SmartrMail, maybe acquiring it, and they ended up buying my friend's company instead, Conversio. And I think at a good multiple as well. I was like, oh damn, you took our exit opportunity. So anyway, he used Discretion Capital, and so we were pretty sure we were going to use them, and we talked to them and got them going, and they ran the whole process for us all throughout 2022.
Yeah, Volset is Discretion Capital, I believe.
Yes.
Rob Walling, who we've had on the show a couple of times, actually. So there's folks can check out Startups for the Rest of Us, which is Rob's podcast, which Einar is often co-hosts and interviewed for. So there's lots of connections there. Folks want to learn more about their firm, but that's obviously a very well-known M&A firm in the SaaS world, software as a service world. So tell me about the process. So instead of just, a lot of people listening and say, oh, I got an inbound, I don't want to go through, the kind of common rebuttal is, I don't want to go through the disruption of running a process. These guys really seem super nice and interested. Why would I, create all this disruption? Why don't I just go with the one inbound company that seems nice? But you'd received this advice from this very successful guy who said, look, there's one rule, run a process.
Yeah, I just think, you want to create, if you want to maximize for the best number, you need multiple interested parties. You need that kind of competitive tension. Yeah.
And how did Einar deal with the churn rate? How did he choose to kind of position that? Did he preempt the objection from investors? How did that go down?
It actually wasn't a big deal. So the guys all I think we would have had 5 people take a proper look at us and got LOIs from. I reckon we got 3 LOIs and maybe a 4th sort of offer that was super low ball, wasn't even it's just a number thrown out an email, which was too low. And the churn never really was a sticking point or a problem. It is just what kind of this space faces. So it actually, that wasn't the biggest sticking point was our growth rate was slowing. We're trying to maximize for a great SaaS multiple, but if we've gone from a kind of 100% growth rate down to 50 to 40 down to it's looking like it's only 15 to 20 3 years in a row, is this thing heading to minus territory, right? So that actually was kind of the hardest sell for those guys and us.
How did you handle it?
You sell the dream. We actually had a big meaty new feature that everyone had been asking for, which was in SMS. So SMS automation, all of the kind of technology stack that we'd applied to email, we were rolling out for SMS, and it looked like a winner. So that was how we handled it. That was coming online. There was some good evidence that it was going to work. Yeah, that was it.
So you've got the email stack and sure that was dropping, but you had this big feature waiting in the wings. Were you tempted at all to harvest that field yourself and say, you know what, maybe we'll just put this on hold for a couple of years, launch the SMS and then go to market when we're much larger? Did that conversation come up at all?
I mean, yeah, it came up, and we had investors, a group here called Sydney Angels, were our sort of seed investors, but coming along was a small amount. Blackbird, which is a VC fund here, and SmartMate, we're an accelerator. So we had them, and sort of they would like a bigger bang, right? but we'd never made a profit. We'd been running for 6 years. We'd burned money in a small amount, whatever. We'd never really spat out money out the top, and we're up against such fierce competition that it felt like a local maximum. The window felt open for M&A. Everyone was interested. You could see these big deals happening in it. So I just thought, look, let's strike while the iron's hot here. Let's. So
and you were hoping for sort of the buying for 1 to 2, selling for 3 to 5. What was your reaction to the offers that they came in? You say you got 3 LOIs. Were they kind of where you hoped they would be, or what was your reaction to the offers?
They were a bit under, and we were trying to push hard. We were like talking about 7 times top line. This is what we want. So they were a little under where we wanted, but we had a real one that was like a good number. And the terms of the deal, I can't actually say the number, but it was over 4 times top line, the offer. And then that was a good anchor to go back to everyone else and say, oh, look, these guys have been, good number, give us your best. But what actually happened was, so that was at the very start of 2022. And so, discretion had gone out to all of their Rolodex and all the people we'd ever talked to, blah, blah, blah. LOI's in the highest number. They wanted a 3-month due diligence where it was exclusive. We're just dealing with them. And we thought, okay, well, they sound real, sounds fair. So they did this 3-month DD. And at the end of it, they turned around and said they didn't have any money. So we got into July and, the DD had gone fine. There were no skeletons thrown up, whatever. And then they just kind of said, oh, look, sorry, guys, we were relying on closing out our fund to do this and we haven't. So bad luck.
Wow.
And so that was in July, and we'd done this 6 months of, and you count the money in your head. You sort of, oh, look, I'm going to have this and it's going to be great. And, and you negotiate 20 back and forth on this bloody contract, and then it just disappears. And that, by the time July 22 had rolled around, markets were starting to decline. Things were starting to get a bit hairy. And it was pretty high stress, but like I was so glad that we'd done the full roundup in January, because we actually had you had these other people who had missed out. And meanwhile, while we'd been doing in this, exclusivity LOI period, we'd actually had more inbound from 2 others just randomly. And so we went to them when we'd had exclusivity. We had to wait till it ran out. We went to them and said, oh, look, you're in luck. These guys have fallen off. What's your best offer? And so Relay were one of them, had come in late and missed the boat. And so, it was just lucky, I guess. And thankfully, they came in at, like, for us, what we thought was a high number too. We ended up getting the deal was actually better in the end, because it was, the other had part stock and a bit bigger earnout and stuff. And this was all cash. So that's how it happened. And then, then dealing with the next round, and then it ended up finishing in, I guess, October. And that was, a 10-month process. And, you think you have the money disappears. You're like, oh, now we're totally screwed because we haven't been focusing on growing the business. And then, so 10 months later, we did get a really good outcome. But, man, I went to the doctor the month after in November, and I'd put on like more than 10 kilos. My cholesterol had gone up to statin level, and my biological age was like 6 years older than what my age should be. And the doctor was just like, you need to sort your life out here, mate. So, that was the process.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I've got so many questions. One of the first is around the initial offer that fell through. What attempts did you make to verify that the people making the offer had the funds to make the offer? Like, I guess a lot of our listeners might be surprised to hear there are people running around making acquisition offers that don't have the money. and they'd be curious to know, like, what do I need to be looking out for to make sure that the company that's making me an offer actually has the funds to close?
Yeah. I guess it's one of those rookie things, we didn't ask for proof of funds or anything like that. We didn't think you'd have to. I guess the red flag in retrospect was that it was a brand new fund. It was a sort of fund started by a guy who sort of sells entrepreneur courses, probably another red flag. Legit guy, big audience, seems to have done a bunch of deals, starting this new fund, going to roll up e-commerce companies like us. So we were going to be the first acquisition. But then during DD, I guess, we did speak to a bunch of different people who were sort of part of that, part of who was going to be growing the business. And there may be a few other red flags there. But it just didn't cross our minds that they wouldn't actually come through with, we'd pass DD and then they wouldn't come through with the money. And again, the kind of the terms of that exclusivity were, I guess, if we read it properly, they didn't have to do the deal. I guess that's what DD is, right? I don't know. We'd only done it once properly.
Yeah, I mean, usually the letter of intent has a non-binding, offer where either party can walk away without a penalty, unless there's a breakup clause, which is very, very rare in like a smaller transaction. It's usually like giant company A buying giant company B, but it's very rare. So I don't think it's uncommon for folks to walk away, which is, it's come up on this show quite a few times where acquirers say they have the money and then last minute they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And, it can really derail a process. In your case, you had so much demand for your business that you were able to recover. Was there anyone, Relay or others, that kind of dug in and say, well, why did that deal fall apart? Because that's the part that people worry about, right? A broken deal, people wonder, well, what did they find in diligence that's had them walk away? And so it can be a bit of a delicate conversation. How did you handle that?
Yeah, it certainly probably would have put off the folks that we circled back to, I would say. But it was, I think it was just lucky that we had a couple more come in while that process was running. We certainly, if we'd had to go back and be serious about the other couple of LOIs, we certainly would have gotten a lower number for sure. They could have held our feet to the flame.
What was the reaction of your investors during this process?
They were supportive. So, we weren't that big as a software company, 18, 19 people. Kind of, you really rely on the energy of the founder to grow that to the next level or take it to $1 billion or whatever. It's really on the founders and their kind of willingness to keep pushing. And so the conversations, I had with investors was, look, I think this is going to be the best outcome. And they were like, well, look, if you want to sell, you should sell, because if you take your foot off the pedal, I don't see it continuing to grow as well or whatever. So they were on board, and they were going to get the first deal was 4x markup, and we ended up getting about 5x top line. So they were going to get a good return. Not so great. They want to get 100, but still a good return.
If they had given you $1 to invest, like what would that $1 have turned into by the time you sold?
Yeah, about 5. Yeah.
Wow. So good deal for them.
Yeah, pretty good. You throw money into these illiquid, high risk startups to try and get 20x or whatever, like 100x. But certainly better than, certainly good.
Yeah, it sounds like a great outcome. I appreciate you sharing the story. Are you up for a quick lightning round of questions?
Yeah,
Just a couple
sure.
words answer would be fine, or as long as you want to go is good too. So we're all about trying to help our listeners understand what are some of the kind of sleazy tricks and slimy tactics that acquirers try to play on entrepreneurs who are going through it for the first time? So I know you've raised some money, different companies. You obviously have a few now under your belt. What's been the slimiest thing you've seen?
Slimy. Well, when we were raising back in the early days, we did have one VC in Australia, and they're not a fund anymore. They're good at PR and terrible to founders, and they gave us this investment deal that added a 20% or 25% ESOP, and would have diluted the hell out of us. And they wanted 25% of the company in the seed plus this 25% ESOP. And we would have suddenly diluted to 49% control. And we're looking at this term sheet and I was like, am I crazy? Do we end up with not controlling the business at the seed round here? So that was years ago. Those guys were scumbags. They're not a VC that exists anymore, for any of them listening. So I saw that happen once. What else? It's not slimy at all, but just something I'm glad we did was we really pushed for cash, not equity. And if we'd been willing to kind of say, we'll take equity in the fund or the acquirer, half plus half cash, we probably would have got a higher number too. But that liquidity is so valuable to me. I'm not rich, but I can pay off my house and be comfortable, whatever. I've been a liquid for so long in these things. Taking cash was something I was glad that and that was my co-founder. Phil really was insistent on that, and I'm really glad he did because it made such a big difference in retrospect. So that was the opposite one.
I love it when acquirers say, we want you to roll some equity. We're going to go to the moon. And it's just such a huge disconnect between your motivations for selling. If I thought I was going to go to the moon and wanted to risk it all and have it all on my shoulders, why would we even be talking?
Totally. But imagine going from a founder where you run your little company, you can do whatever you want. It's all on you to grow, right? And, then you take equity in some big thing where you can't even control the outcome. You're just stuck. No way, man. No way.
Yeah, it's a tricky way to navigate things for sure. What was the biggest mistake in hindsight? We all have, the ability to look back on stuff and think, I could have done this or should have done that. As you think about the deal, which sounds like a great outcome, is there one thing that you might try to do differently if you could do it over again?
No. There's no, obviously trying to find out if the people acquiring had money, sure, but no, it was all a good learning process. There's no big mistake I can think of. I'm happy with the outcome.
Was there, I've heard, selling can be emotionally, a bit of a roller coaster. I'm assuming when the first deal fell apart, that was the emotional low to the process. Was there a high that you can remember, where you were when this happened?
I was pretty stoked when Relay came along and they were good to deal with. When you work with someone on the other end who's smart, fast, and empathetic, I guess, a good, a trustworthy person. It was just chalk and cheese, and it was okay, great. I was I really want to sell to these guys, even if their number comes in a bit lower, because it's sort of life's too short to sort of really deal with jerks, and you'd have this worry, even if you sell to someone who might be super hard ass, or maybe seems slightly untrustworthy, whatever. Maybe they could hold your feet to the flame 6 months down the track and say, you've broken a warrant or something. So no, when when they came along and they were immediately like on the same page, they had the same vision for what we wanted to do. We'd even had the idea of what Relay was. Maybe we could do a roll-up thing with ecom. So yeah, that was like, I was like, oh my God, I think these guys are going to be, I think this might work out. So that was good.
Do you remember where you were when the wire hit your bank?
Nah, I can't remember much from those years.
That's surprising. Most people know exactly where they were.
No, man. I've got a terrible memory for this stuff anyway.
You already mentioned a gentleman who sold his company for $800 million Australia, a real mentor and incredible insight. So I know leaned on him. Were there other people or resources that you could point our listeners to that they might find beneficial in going through this? I know Rob Walling's podcast often covers off exits, so that's a good one for folks to know as well. The startups for the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, what I do is I make a real effort to talk to entrepreneurs who've done it. So yeah, I try and do the one-to-one catch-ups, coffees, whatever, even go to the events where they are and talk to them because I just think you get so much alpha from like talking in person the ugly stuff probably isn't going to be on the podcast anyway. Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's like, I love catching up with people and shooting the shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Last question. Did you buy yourself a trophy? Something to commemorate the win?
I did actually. I bought a Tesla. I'd been driving a 2001 Subaru station wagon my whole life. And so I thought, okay, let's just waste a bit of money here. So I got one of the fast Teslas. That was it.
The Model S dual motor?
No, there's just a dual motor Y. I've got kids to throw in. And you can't get the X here in Australia anymore. So I had to get it.
Okay. It's supposedly the safest car on the road. So you're playing your role as a good dad too while you're flying along.
Exactly. It's for my kids. Sure. It's definitely for my kids.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Enjoy your Tesla. I think you well earned it. And I'm really grateful for you sharing your story. Is there a place that folks could learn about Bluethumb? It sounds like an incredible resource for folks. Is it just simply Bluethumb? Well, you tell me the URL. Yeah, check us out. So in the USA, we're bluethumbart.com. And in Australia, we're bluethumb.com.au. So, Google us. If you need art for your house, we definitely the place to have a look. Also, we have started an art podcast where we interview interesting folks, not necessarily art collectors, but just people who've done something, interesting people who actually enjoy the art in their home too, and talk about the stories of how they put the art throughout their house and what it means to them. So yeah, you can check that out. That's called the Art in My Home podcast. The Art in My Home podcast and bluethumbart.com in the US. And George, if folks want to reach out on social, are you more a LinkedIn guy or Instagram? What's the best place for people to message you on Insta or social? Yeah, you can find me wasting time on Twitter. I'm GT Hartley on Twitter. Otherwise, just find me on LinkedIn as well. And we'll put George's Twitter X profile and LinkedIn and bluethumbart.com all in the show notes, available at builttosell.com. Thanks, George. Thanks a lot, John. Been great.